Hello, and welcome back to the virtual classroom. I'm your host, Dr. Olmsted. As you can see, today's topic is New World Settlement, and starting with the Chesapeake region. Now, as always, take a moment, hit pause on your video, and jot down the lecture outline, as well as pay particular attention to those key terms at the top. Make sure you can identify the who, what, where, when, and why, and make sure you can tie these terms to each other and their larger historical significance. This will prove very helpful not only for test purposes, but also any future essays. Now with that, let's begin. Now, when we left off last time, we talked about what life was like in America at European contact and broached the subject of the Columbian Exchange. But all that was taking place mostly in the Spanish Caribbean and ultimately into what is modern-day Mexico. Then if we went further south into modern-day Peru. But since this is U.S. history class, let's turn our attention back to the north and discuss when, where, and the circumstances surrounding the English colonization of what is now the United States. Now, the reality is there was a 100-year gap, almost a 100-year gap, between the Spanish and the English, their colonial efforts in the New World. Why? The Spanish were making money hand over fist. They were basically bending over and finding gold, finding silver. And when I say bending over, what I actually mean is they were forcibly making the Native Americans work in the mines, so they would literally work to death. Then they would, of course, bend over and pick up the silver and gold. But why does it take the English, this proud English tradition, almost 100 years? Well, first of all, colonization is expensive. It's expensive to build ships. It's expensive to hire a crew and a competent captain. It's expensive to, have to pay for supplies, to pay for round trip, to pay for the expenses of the families who need to live while their men are away. That all takes money. And if you know your British history, you'll know there's a few things going on in England back in the 1500s. In addition, the Spanish were a large deterrent. Despite their desire for competition, the Spanish got extremely wealthy from the New World with gold and silver. And smartly on their part, they took the gold and silver, they got all this money, and they reinvested it into building the best navy in the world, the Spanish Armada. And of course, they don't want any competition who might infringe upon their newfound territory, and therefore they use that navy to prevent the British and other European nations from intruding upon their newfound land. So from the outside, it is extremely difficult. It's expensive, and there's a strong deterrent with the Spanish. But then there's another problem that's another internal problem. And this problem comes from what you see on your screen here. The problem is Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation, and ultimately with King Henry VIII. Now, I'm not going to go into a laborious detail right here, but the quick cliff note version of this is that, of course, in 1517, Martin Luther nailed the 95 Theses to the door of the church. Didn't really happen. And thus began the Protestant Reformation, in which the Christian church went from Catholic, meaning universal, to a split between the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church. Now, why does this matter? Now, we'll get to much more detail about Henry VIII and his wives in a couple lectures from now discussing the New England settlement. But for now, just realize that what happens is in Spain, the Protestant Reformation takes much longer to get there. And therefore, Spain doesn't have the religious turmoil that Britain will happen. And therefore, they remain fully Catholic and fully committed to their Catholic beliefs. There's no internal strife over it. They're able to ignore some of the other problems other European nations are facing, and they begin to explore. The English, however, in large part because the Protestant Reformation does reach there, and because King Henry VIII, again, if you don't know the story, he was married. The wife did not bear him a son, and therefore he wanted to divorce said wife, and the Catholic Church said, no, that's a sin. King Henry said, please, please, let me divorce. I need a son, a male heir. And the Catholic Pope said, no. So he said, well, screw you then. I'm divorcing the Catholic Church. And he formed what became the Church of England, the Anglican Church, which, while theoretically was Protestant, for all practical purposes, it was still Catholic in form and function. The only difference was, well, King Henry was the head of the church rather than the Pope. But this squabble and this turmoil instituted by King Henry VIII ends up being a major reason why the English do not begin colonization. Because once Henry's children do take over for him, and he has 3 different heirs that will take over in his lineage. One, Bloody Mary, Queen of Scots, she believes in full Catholicism. His one son believes in fully Protestant. And so over their reigns, their successive reigns, there is tremendous turmoil as they swerve from Catholic, or back to Catholic, then back to Protestantism, much more Protestant than Henry was. And then before we finally settle into his daughter, Queen Victoria, Queen Elizabeth, who they will finally try to find a middle ground. And so therefore, during the 1500s, while the Spanish are making bank in the New World, England is dealing with a lot of internal problems over, should we be Catholic, should we be like Catholic but not really Catholic, or should we become more Protestant? And you all do know, right, the reason they're called Protestants, right? Because the root word is protest, and they are protesting the Catholic Church. And so it is not until Elizabeth takes over that we finally see Elizabeth I. She takes over finally after her brother and sister flame out. And things finally settle down, and they can now begin to settle the issue of religion and begin to look at expansion, colonization. And of course, this sets off the period known as the Golden Age of England, the Elizabethan period. And when Elizabeth dies, her son, King James I, takes over, and while he doesn't have near the gravitas or the political acumen that his mother had, he will continue in her footsteps in regards to, Protestant tradition and its settled idea of religion. And so this is, again, known as the Golden Age of England. Unfortunately, that's what we talk about it in history as the Golden Age. Unfortunately, if you look beneath the glossy, shiny veneer, we will find a much more bleak picture of what life was really like in Elizabethan England. So let's start there. What was life like in England during the 1500s as we were fighting over Protestant versus Catholic and finally settling into the Elizabethan period? Well, society looks very much like this. It's a triangle. And what I mean by this, it's a strict hierarchy. And at the top of this triangle, we have 5% of the population belong to this upper echelon at the top of the triangle. So who belongs there? Who belongs to that top 5%? Well, the king and queen, obviously. Nobility. Your top military leaders and your upper religious leaders. Oh, by the way, that 5% controls 95% of the population. I'm sorry, they control that 5% of the population controls 95% of the wealth. Let me repeat this. I know I said it wrong the first time. That 5%, that top 5%, those 5%ers, they control 95% of the wealth in Elizabethan England. I feel like I'm starting to sound like Bernie Sanders here. Well, so if they control 95% of the wealth, what's left for the rest of the 95%? Well, we have that large blue section in the middle. Let's call this group the middle sort, or the middling sort, and this represents 45% of the population. So who belongs to this area, this category? Well, we're talking skilled persons. This is kind of the theme here, skilled people in this group. Merchants, lawyers, doctors, blacksmiths, tax collectors, everyone's favorite, bankers, and of course, land-owning farmers. The key there, of course, is land-owning. So 45% of the population, this middling sort, they control the remaining 5% of the wealth. Now, I understand I'm a history professor. I'm not a math major, but even I can do this very simple math. We have 50% of the population, 5% control 95% of the wealth, 45% control 5%, which means now 50% of the population control 100% of the wealth. Wow. And we haven't gotten to the last bottom section of Elizabethan England, in what we call the lower sort, representing half, 50% of the population. And of course, who belongs to this category? Well, these are people like prisoners, peasants, serfs, beggars, thieves, and of course, everyone's favorite categories, prostitutes and orphans. And these bottom dwellers have no money, no property, no skill, and absolutely no hope of upward mobility. While this is not technically called a caste system, for all practical purposes, it is. This lower sort, 50% of the population, controls exactly 0% of the wealth. These are people with no land, no property, no money, no skill, and no hope. And by the time we start settling into this golden age of England, so-called, there were some in English society that really began to say, man, maybe something's wrong with this picture. When we look around England, we want to see the golden age. We want to see this royal veneer, this shiny veneer. We want to see all this new technology, this capability in shipping and in exploration, all these newfangled gadgets. We want to build our military. But when we look out around the streets, we see half the population living in blight, in poverty, in destitution. And that's a big problem. And so a bunch of these middling, and especially the upper sort, began to get together and they begin to discuss how they can help the situation. Now, I'm being a little facetious here because when I say help, I mean get rid of. They don't really care about uplifting those 50% because if they did, they believe it would take away from their status. If you make them and give them upper mobility, it will apparently detract and diminish their stature, their standing, their prominence. And so one of the first major attempts to clean up this lower sort came from a group known as the West Country Colonial Promoters. Now, this is a really cool name. You should never forget the definition of this name. They're named because these are a group of wealthy men who, you guessed it, come from the West Country. And this is in the 1580s, and they decide that they should call themselves the West Country Colonial Promoters. It gives you your geographic location, and it tells you exactly what they want to do. They want to promote colonization. So why are they called this? Well, again, they're from the West Country. They want to promote colonization. So the West Country Colonial Promoters. Now, they have this vision, this dream, this goal, that colonization will be the answer to England's problem of cleaning up that lower sort 50%. How do they do this? What's their plan? Well, it's simple. Let's round up those 50% of people, those lower sort blights. Let's put them on a ship and ship them to the New World in America. Not only do we get rid of this blight, we will ship them to the New World. They will be able to start a colony in the Americas. They will be able to then work and generate wealth for us, the West Country colonial promoters, make us richer, and of course, ultimately for the crown, for the glory of England. So they began to look at the jails, they began to look at the undesirables, the prostitutes, the orphans, the beggars. They began to look to them to round them up, put them on a ship, and send them to the Americas. And of course, who wouldn't want to do this? Remember, these are people with no hope, no skills, no future. But they could now become productive members of English society and maybe even have upward mobility and respect. Maybe. So my question for you would be, if you were one of these 50% lower sort people with no real hope in England, remember, in England, as a lower sort, you were not even allowed to take a fishing or a piece of wood, a stick, put a piece of string on it and fish in the rivers. That's illegal. That's reserved for the wealthier people. You were not allowed to ride a horse or own a gun. Again, I told you, you have no hope. Now, see, these West Country men had this great goal, but we have to talk about the second part of their name, the colonial promoters, because people aren't going to automatically say, "Ooh, yeah, sign me up. Put me on a ship and send me in the middle of nowhere." And so you have to convince people to do this. This is where the colonial promoter part came in. People like Sir Walter Raleigh, Sir Edwin Drake, they begin to portray the New World as a place that will offer tremendous economic opportunity for the laboring poor of England. Above all, these colonial promoters talked about how the work in the New World would promise a particular brand of freedom. Again, they frame it in these terms. By going to the New World and doing this work, you will be endowed with a particular type of special English freedom. This particular freedom was very near and dear to Englishmen' hearts. You see, Shakespeare wrote about it, English society valorized it. The idea was, as an Englishman, as a proper Englishman, no one wanted to be dependent. The goal was to always be independent. See, dependence was associated with negative things like children, women, wage laborers, servants, slaves. And so by definition, during this period, none of these people, any of those 50% people or children, even wives, they could never be fully free because they were dependent upon someone else for their well-being. A wife was dependent upon her husband. Children were dependent upon their parents, their fathers. And likewise, if you were a servant, a wage laborer, a slave, you were dependent upon someone else to take care of you for your livelihood. The goal for the Englishmen was to achieve economic independence and be independent. And the only way to do this was to own land, something that will never happen to these lower sort in England. And so Walter Raleigh, Sir Edwin Drake, they begin to promote this idea of this untapped virgin wilderness that would only be found in the Americas. This gave hope to the people of England's lower sort. In fact, they depict this area as an endless bounty of untouched land. And so you get images like you see in the bottom left here. It's a wide open area. There's land, there's trees. And then you get more specific images of what you actually see on the ground. You see here's some early propaganda pictures from the 16th century that show you what life is like. Now, again, they're not trying to say Indians don't exist there. because everyone knows they do. Everyone's heard of the warfare between Indians and the Spaniards. Everyone knows this. But notice the screen right now. What do you see here? Well, the top left, you see a bunch of half-naked Indians, savages, who are, well, they don't look warlike. In fact, they look quite peaceful. I mean, they're dancing around half naked and dancing around a fire around some poles, enjoying themselves. They don't look vicious at all. You see in the bottom left, what do you see there? Well, yeah, they're Indians, but hey, even if those so-called primitive savage Indians can do it, look at them. They're sticking a pole in the water, a spear, and getting fish. Remember, this is something that no lower sort English person was able to do. But yet, in the New World, these lower sort would have this opportunity to get land and fish for themselves. And again, also ride horses. And of course, the picture on the right you see is a picture of a camp. What do you not see? There's nothing there to defend themselves. Again, you see the bottom right of that picture. You have the naked Indians dancing around a pole. You see the men huddled down doing some ritual, going to the bathroom, I'm not quite sure. You have them setting up a food table, so there's food available. And you see the crops on the right. 3 different levels of crop growth, depending on what type of season it was. Again, this makes it easy for the illiterate lower sort to be able to say, ooh, this looks good. And again, there's no defense here. Other than the spears they're using for fishing, you don't see any type of weaponry. And therefore, you get the idea that, no, these are peaceful. They would be good neighbors. And if these so-called, savage Indians can catch fish, grow corn, how much more that should a proper Christian Englishman be able to do so even more? And just in case you want a little more detail, here's a direct quote from Arthur Barlowe, who spoke directly, had visited this area known as Roanoke. You see the quote on the screen. It says, "We were entertained with all love and kindness and as much bounty, after their manner, as they could possibly devise. We found the people most gentle, loving, and faithful, void of all guile and treason, and such as live after the manner of the golden age of England. The people only care how to defend, wait, hold on. Oh, from the cold in their short winter. Have you ever been to Virginia? It's a little long winter there too. Not quite as bad as England, I guess. And to feed themselves with as much meat as the soil affords. Their meat is very well sodden, and they make a broth very sweet and savory." Again, no mention of any kind of defense, that they don't want them there. In fact, they kind of insinuate that, oh, they loved us. They fed us, they took care of us. Well, why? Well, presumably Arthur Barlowe is coming to Roanoke Colony, a Roanoke area in Virginia, with just a few men, a handful of men. They're not looking to conquer, they're not looking to take over, colonize, but rather they're there just to explore. And therefore, these Indians who are there are more than happy to share with them as they would other guests. But don't you think that these Indians might change their mind once they find out that, oh, there's a lot of people coming now? Of course they will. And of course, so between the images we saw on this screen and of course this quote, what we see here is a glamorous life, that you can have open space and land and grow crops. Again, the goal for an independent Englishman. It's a leisurely filled, fruitful land, readily food available. And again, they're aware of Indian violence between the Spanish and the Indians, but this is not a violent people, according to the pictures and, of course, Arthur Barlowe. So now my question for you is, how many of you want to sign up? How many of you are now convinced, as if you were the lower sort person, would now be ready to embark on the ship? Oh, and by the way, if you don't just volunteer, you're probably going to be voluntold. We're going to fill that ship. And so, sure enough, in 1585, the West Country colonial promoters round up volunteering. And again, most of them probably did volunteer. And they are going to begin their colonization process for the English. And so they hired the 2 men, Arthur Barlowe scout the land. It's a good place to land, Roanoke Island. They chose it, you see in the bottom of your screen, the map, because it was a good defensive location, hidden away from the Spanish, who again are patrolling the waters, their armada, to prevent English intrusion. And so in 1585, their first attempt, they will send approximately 90 colonists, all men, into Roanoke, what is now present-day North Carolina. Problem. Maybe you should have been to Roanoke, the island itself. Well, in case you have, let me describe this ideal place to grow crops. It's a beach. It's sand. It's salt water. Now, I admit I'm not a farmer, other than trying to grow some random tomatoes in my back little garden section. I'm not much of a horticulturalist. But I know that salt water and sand are not ideal to grow massive amount of crops that you need to feed a colony. And so they can't really grow crops there. Even if there was an ideal situation, these are all lower sort men. What skill do they have? Now, maybe a few of them were serfs. They could grow crops, but the majority of them have no requisite skill needed to actually make a colony. This was not very well thought through. This was merely expediency of getting rid of people and, hey, make a buck on the side. So you can't grow crops. What do these men do? Well, they use the skill they know the best, beg. And so they beg the Indians. And for a while, the Indians obliged. Again, they feel bad for these poor white people. But, after a while, Indians need to feed their own families, and the food starts running out, and the begging wears a little thin. And finally, Indians start saying no. They're tired of lazy, mooching neighbors. So instead of trying to find their own food and develop some skill, they decide to kill the Indian chief. Yeah, probably not the best solution to this problem. Now, on the one hand, you might think it's justified the Indians would go kill them all, but they didn't do that. Instead, they just left, which I might argue is a fate far worse than a quick death at the hand of Indians, because now they're going to slowly starve to death because they have no way to feed themselves. And so because they sent lower sort people with no skill, and they didn't try to build the skill, they just begged and then ultimately killed the Indian chief, they are now in trouble. And by spring of 1586, they all go back to England. It's a failure. But don't worry. If at first you don't succeed, try again. And sure enough, in 1587, this time the West Country colonial promoters, they will send a second voyage. So in 1587, led by Governor John White, they will send 94 colonists, but this time including 17 women and 9 children, make it a family affair. 17 women, most of whom were prostitutes, and 9 orphans. They were told, let me go back to my map real quick, they were told to go to where the dot is that says Jamestown Colony. This is where they were told to go. Unfortunately, as the ship was approaching the American colonies, the America coast, the ship captain said, there's a problem, you see. I don't actually know how to get to the Chesapeake, and we're now in modern-day Jamestown. But you know where I do know where to go? I know how to get to the directions to Roanoke. So the ship captain steered the ship south and dumped these 94 colonists right back at Roanoke Island. And of course, this time, we already know it's a bad location. They've already alienated the Indians who live there. And so very quickly, Governor John White says, okay, guys, we're in a very bad situation here. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to get on the ship right here. I'm going to head back to Old England. You guys stay here and stay alive, and I will be back shortly with supplies so we can start our colony. We're going to survive this. Yep. Let's see. That was in fall of 1587. Let's see. 1588, 1589. He finally returns 3 years later in 1590. Why? Now, I'm not trying to make him be a villain here. He's not a bad guy necessarily. In fact, he did try to return quickly. In fact, he was eager to because his granddaughter was actually the first English person born in America. That his daughter had had a baby once they had arrived before he had left back to Old England. He did try to come back. Unfortunately, there was a minor squabble between the English and the Spanish Armada, a little kerfuffle. And because of this 3-year war, he was not able to get a ship to take him back. The Queen would not let him go. So he finally returns in 1590, and no one's there. The colony has been abandoned. The only thing he does find, however, what you see pictured on your screen right here, etched in a tree, is the words Croatoan. Now, they think this is a Croatoan island. He goes and looks there as well. He will find one more letters written in a tree, just the words Croat. And again, he finds none of them. These 94 colonists have all disappeared, presumably dead. And quite honestly, this is one of those history mystery things. We don't really know what fully happened. In fact, I will post a link to a separate video you can watch. It is a wonderful little video. It's kind of the old unsolved mystery style motif. It is narrated by none other than Leonard Nimoy, Dr. Spock himself from Star Trek. Watch it, listen to it. It's quite fascinating just to understand what really happened here. And just so happens about 2 weeks ago, in late June 2020, there has been some breakthroughs through archaeological finds that finally think that maybe, just maybe, they found the grave sites of these Roanoke colonists. Now, what really happened to them, we don't fully know yet. Perhaps they were just killed by Indians because, they already had animosity between the two groups. Perhaps they did try to find a nearby ship and sail elsewhere. Most likely, what most scholars kind of lean toward is that they dispersed among Indian tribes and actually probably became members of Indian tribes and intermarried and became essentially Indian. But again, we don't fully know yet. But nonetheless, what we have here, we have 2 attempts at colonization. We have 2 failures, and we have almost 200 people dead. Presumed dead, at least. So, what happens? Well, don't forget, this was a West Country colonial promoter venture. They paid for it. They go belly up as an organization. And England decides, you know what? Let's pump the brakes here. This is 2 failures in a row. Let's just stop. For about 20 years, they decide they will not attempt colonization. Finally, in 1606, we will form a new business venture. Again, another private entity, not the Crown, because the Crown doesn't want to waste their money on these colonization efforts until they're successful. And so in 1606, a new private venture forms known as the Virginia Company. Now, if you remember correctly, I mentioned that the West Country colonial promoters, their kind of main goal was clean up England, make money with that. The Virginia Company is kind of the exact opposite. They want to make money, and as a byproduct, hey, we'll clean up England while we're at it. They're kind of the antithesis. And so in 1606, these group of wealthy business individuals form this company known as the Virginia Company. And these are a group of wealthy men who just want to get wealthier. And so they want to start a colony. And they're going to use the poor, the riffraff, the lower sort to do so. And so in 1606, they form this company and they become responsible for the start of a new colony in the Americas. Now, they are determined, though, not to go back and make the mistake of going to Roanoke. Instead, they want to go to the Chesapeake, which you see the dot for Jamestown colony as the Chesapeake region in modern-day Virginia. And so, why the Chesapeake? Well, not that this map shows it as close up as we can. One more map for you here. The reason there was determined to be a good location, there was extensive fresh water sources there. Again, for drinking, for irrigation, very important. There's also a lot of land, which means, again, land for growing crops. There's also 200 miles of land, they estimate, both north and south, 20 miles east to west. Again, this is a large swath of land. The rivers, these freshwater rivers, run deep into the interior. This is important for fresh water. This is important for, well, bathing, for sanitation. It's important for fishing. It's important for communication, for trade, for transportation. It's good for irrigation. All important. And of course, food sources. Not only for fishing, fishing the fish in there, but also larger animals come down to the river to drink and eat the fish, and then you can shoot those animals like bears, deer, etc. Now, I want you all to remember this very well. Remember, the Virginia Company forms in 1606. However, it is finally in 1607 that they will set sail. And I'm sure you all recognize this image from the movie Pocahontas, but just to make sure it's ingrained in your minds forever, let's play a little scene from this. Again, propaganda. Now remember, mostly they're the lower sort who are going. The 3 G's, God, glory, and gold.
Hey, look, is that Smith? That's him, all right, the old sea dog, Captain John Smith. I've heard some amazing stories about him. Are you coming on this voyage too? Of course he is, you halfwit. You can't fight Indians without John Smith.
That's right. I'm not about to let you boys have all the fun.
The sultry voice of Mel Gibson. Yes, they were that deluded that they believed pick gold right off a tree. In fact, the Spanish was able to find it very easily. And again, this represents so many important things in this song, despite it being obviously fictitious the way they present it. The idea that this is propaganda, that they're being told there's all these things in the New World. They don't really know this. That you can bend over or pick off a tree some gold. And of course, you see John Smith, who's going to be there to fight off the Indians who they assume are savages. I'm going to play the video a little bit longer because it does talk about this racism that appears of how the English see the Native Americans.
Or maybe 2 or 3. We're stalling the Virginia Company.
What do you suppose the New World will look like?
Like all the others, I suppose.
I've seen hundreds of New Worlds, Thomas.
What could possibly be different about this one?
Now, so in 1607, in May, they send 104 colonists to the New World to settle in Jamestown. Now, I want you all to know, let's pretend for a moment you are one of these 104 colonists. I want you to remember a few things, though, that the English want to make sure you do. Number 1, most important thing you can do, besides find gold, never let the Indians see you sick or dead. This is important. You want to make sure you maintain that aura of superiority and domination over Native Americans. So do not let them see you dead. Never let them see an English dead body. This will be perceived as weakness. We cannot appear weak in front of the Native Americans. We must maintain the upper hand. So in 1607, May, we will send 104 colonists to start the first permanent English settlement in the New World. Let's give them a few months and check back on them, say January of 1608. Let's see, how do we do here? Oh, wow. I'm thinking it's going to be a little difficult to hide all those dead bodies because it must stank. 38 colonists remaining. Oh, well, so much for that idea of superiority. Well, nonetheless, let's see, 104 colonists, 38 remaining. What should we do next? Got it. Send more people. And sure enough, in October 1609, we will send 500, mostly all lower sort people from Old England. That was October 1609. Let's see, October, November, December, January, February. March 1610. 60 remaining. In fact, I'm pretty sure the death rate's going up here. The first time we lost, 2/3. Now we're talking, wow, this is a high mortality rate. But if at first you don't succeed, send more people. In fact, between 1610 and 1611, the next couple of years, the Virginia Company will ship over 1,200 mostly lower sort colonists to the Chesapeake and Jamestown. Yeah, 1616, only 350 people left. Talking only a quarter, almost a quarter of the people actually live here. And by 1616, these 350 are sick and diseased. They're not dead yet, but they kind of wish they were. So finally in 1616, the Virginia Company says, okay, hold on. We sent more people. That didn't work. We sent more people. That still didn't work. So they decided to try something new. They sent more people. Yes, you got that right. All told, between 1607 and 1622, the Virginia Company sent 10,000 people to Virginia. And by 1622, there are only 1,200 remaining. Now, on the one hand, this is good. The colony has survived. There are 1,200 people living there. On the other hand, 8,800 people, mostly lower sort, are dead. Well, I guess it did help clean up the streets of Old England a little bit, from their perspective. Now, needless to say, the colony is not making money. Remember, these are lower sort people. There's no gold in Virginia. And by 1622, there's a lot of death on the Virginia Company's hands. They're not making money. The Virginia Company is bankrupt, and Jamestown will become a royal colony. Now, we'll discuss what happens in 1622 in the next lecture. Things do turn around eventually for Jamestown, and the royal crown is going to profit immensely off of Jamestown. But for the Virginia Company, it's an abject failure, despite Jamestown being the first permanent English colony in the New World. Before we get to the next lecture, let's talk about why for a minute. Why is it that by 1622 there were only 1,200 people remaining out of 10,000 who were shipped? Well, first of all, despite the outward appearance of a good area, it's actually a very poor environmental location. In fact, if you've ever been to Jamestown, you'll find out it's actually not that much unlike Houston. It's a swamp, which means it's hot, it's humid. There's lots of mosquitoes that bring disease with it. Again, one of the reasons why people are dying. In addition, it's a swampland. It's hard to grow crops. It's hard to grow crops there if you were a knowledgeable, skilled individual who knows what they're doing. But remember, of those 10,000, the vast, vast, vast majority are lower sort with no requisite skills. In addition, there's a major problem with drinking water. Now, let me explain the situation to you, okay? Let me back this up a little bit so you can see a little bit better here. Now, here's the situation. Now, again, we're pretending for a minute you were all part of this, 12. And we're going to say you're surviving here for a minute, which you might not live very long after I explain this to you. You see, besides the first rule, that first important rule was never see you dead, an Englishman dead, because that would just be bad. That failed miserably. The second important rule of Virginia, of Jamestown, was that we need to make sure we separate where we go to the bathroom and our drinking water. This is very important. You don't want to be drinking the same water you're going to the bathroom in. So they made very explicit rules. They said, okay, you see that pond over there? Yeah, that pond, that's the one we're going to use for bathing and, well, for drinking purposes. And that one over there, that's the one we use for the bathroom. So you can, you like a bidet. You can go to the bathroom, no big deal. You can pee in it, you can poop in it, no big deal. So you got it right? Over there is the one for drinking. The one over there is for bathroom. Get it? Drinking, bathroom. Do not mix this up. Whatever you do not mix this up. And I'll give you credit, despite these being unskilled, lower sort individuals, they do listen. They understand. You don't want to be drinking urinated fecal water. This is low-lying ground with an ocean nearby, and every time the tide comes in, those two pools that were nicely separated begin to mix. They come together and form one pool. And so then when the next morning, when the tide goes out and they separate again, you go over to that drinking water one over there, and now these colonists are often drinking what I would refer to as urinated fecal water. They are literally drinking their own excrements, which of course brings even more disease. And when you combine that with malnutrition from lack of skill of growing crops, and of course the mosquitoes, you have a major problem. Why? Nearly 8,800 people are dead. Now, there was one more problem, of course, and that was relations with local Native American tribes. But that is a topic for our next lecture. So until then, think this over. Do not mix up the drinking water versus the bathing water, bathroom water. Don't ever make that mistake. But until then, take care and bye-bye.